So like we're gonna get into a track you based around a Little Uzi Vert track in a second, but like more broadly before we get into that, so like what is it that you look for in tracks when you're gonna find something to like edit or remix or mash up? Like, do you is there something specific you're listening out for when you're listening to like tunes, or is it literally just something will pop up on the radio or whatever? You're just like, yeah, I know I could do something with this.
So I used to remix anything and everything. There was a point very early in my production career where I was making a remix a week and putting it on SoundCloud. And then as I've become more established as an artist, I've done less and less of it. And I've just been trying to find those ones that really, really hit as opposed to doing everything. And when I heard this Lil Uzi record, it's just crazy, the energy, and it's insane. And I was obsessed with it, and I was like, I have to find a way to make this playable for me as a house DJ.
So should we take a little listen to this quickly, like the finished version, and then we'll kind of dig into what you've done?
I'm going to skip the intro because no one needs to hear 30 seconds of drums.
Project, this ain't what you want. Ha! Sissy nigga, I just wanna rock. I just wanna, I just wanna, damn. Whoa! This ain't what you want. I just wanna, this ain't what you want.
That's pretty much it.
So let's start with like the obvious point of here is like the actual Lil Uzi Vert track that you're basing this off. So what's your starting point with that? Like, firstly, what is it? Literally just you've grabbed the track itself and like
so it's been a few months since I've looked at this, right? So I've managed to find some sort of isolated acapella, probably on YouTube, that someone's made. I've also then found the instrumental, probably off YouTube as well. And I've chopped up those parts individually. And that would have been the starting point.
So are you like dragging these into Ableton Live basically, and then what, like warping them, scanning through?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like how much in your head are you approaching this with? Like, I know I'm going to grab this bit of the vocal, I'm going to grab this, or is it like you'll load the whole thing in and then just like?
Yeah, with this track, I would have loaded the whole thing in, and then I know it has these chords running throughout that just have this epic feeling that something amazing is going to happen.
Yeah,
and there's not too much vocal in this record as well. Like, because I'm trying to make a house track, I'm not trying to use loads and loads of vocal. So like the main kind of breakdown here, it's only got like say 8 bars of vocal like looped over. So I was kind of looking for that one bit that when everyone hears it, they know it's the Lil Uzi Vert track.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give them anything that they don't need. I want it to be concise. So if there's not really verses in this track, but if there were verses, I'd probably skip them and just go straight to the chorus.
Yeah, just go for the bit that people are going to know and is going to kind of hit in the club. So with this project here, so which bit would you have like started with? What's the very first thing you would have done here?
I started by chopping up these chords to create this. So the original chords sound like this. And they kind of had that feeling that I wanted to. It's a very epic thing for me. I wanted to capture the epicness. But obviously, when they're kind of legato like that, it's like, oh, something's coming, and I needed to create what was coming, and that was the turning the chords into stabs.
Yeah. So break us down like these chains and what you've got going on here. So are these Ableton simpler?
So what is on here? So I've only just opened this project right now. So as you can see, this is Ableton Simpler I've just cut a specific piece of that instrumental there. On the next one, I've cut the next piece of the instrumental. So I'm kind of using one track for each chord. Yep. I've then got Serum with white noise on it, hitting at the same time as the chord chopped by itself sounds like this. And then when you play it with the white noise as well, it kind of hits differently. I've then got like a reverse chord going into the whole thing. So it's got a sub underneath it as well, so that it hits on the dance floor. So yeah.
So is that sub's just coming from Serum then, like a pretty simple?
Yeah, I think I've bounced that to audio for some reason, but yeah.
Yeah. So take us through. You've got a group here. Like, how much processing are you doing on these chords? Because you said that you probably got this from a YouTube rip.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's some. Probably you talk to some sort of like old hand producers or sort of vinyl heads and tell them that you're playing stuff based on YouTube rips in the club, and they're sort of roll their eyes. But like, how much processing does that take to get that to like fit into a track?
To be honest with you, once you add the white noise, it sounds pretty solid. There's not too much on these chords. So on the group, there's 2 EQs that seem to be turned off. There's some delay here. If I play the delay by itself, I play it without the delay, and then with the delay. You hear it on the tail there, and the delay is automated up so that once the stabs stop, it fills the gap. And to be honest, that's all that's on them. It's just that's all that's on. Oh, hang on, we got some mid-side processing there. The reason for the mid-side processing is because I'm very anal about things hitting correctly in the club. Yeah. And with this original chord sample, it was very, very wide, and when I was mixing the track, I was very aware that I didn't want my stabs to be very wide and disappear on a mono club system. So with the Ableton EQ, I've taken out a lot of the side and boosted the mid. And
so particularly, so you're basically losing those lower frequencies in the side.
Losing the low frequencies in the side. I've got Effectrix on here. Oh, well, okay. This is techier than I thought. The Effectrix is. It's adding some sort of stuttery loop effects that make it just sound a bit more. It sounds like it's doing a little bit more than the simple MIDI that you're seeing. Decapitator is a little bit of drive on it. EQ. I have no idea what this is. Filter, rhythm pan. It's only on 12% mix, so it's adding some texture to it.
I mean, obviously you're sort of joking, saying that you've reopened this and sort of like don't know what these things are doing, but is that kind of representative of the fact that you will just like grab these chords and just play around with stuff?
I'm just throwing stuff at it.
It's not a case of like
this
a set chain and
this shaper box, for example. Like if you turn it up to 100, then you'll hear what it's doing, but it's basically just like distorting and filtering them and stuff. But I've got it at 12%, so all it's going to do is make them feel like they're moving a little bit. After that, I've got another delay, a reverb, another reverb that's automated, delay that's automated. So yeah, there's so much stuff.
Yeah, you're saying it's not. You're like, there's nothing on here, and then you've got like
big compressor. This is a filter, but I actually use it for overdrive and stuff as well. It's got a very cool sound to it. So yeah, there's a few moving parts on those chords as it progresses, as you see from the automation here as well.
So once you've got that part going, what was your next?
Well, I always create around a build up and a drop, and some like real house people probably hate that because it's not real house or whatever. But for me, that's I like moments in the club, So I would have kind of created this build up, and then I would have moved on to the drop. So after that, I always work with the kick and the bass first because I feel like if you get them sitting together correctly, then everything else is easy after that point. Yeah. So with the kick and the bass, I've actually got them in a group as well. I don't always do that, but for some reason I've done that on this track. and they're limited together as well. So the bass is Serum, and it is a preset. It looks like I haven't really touched the preset too much either. After the Serum, I've got a couple of plugins to sidechain the kick, the bass. Sorry, to sidechain the bass from the kick. Couple of EQs. I seem to have taken a lot of the top end off that bass.
So with the bass, because you're saying you've rolled a lot of the top end off there.
Yeah.
How much of a challenge is it? Like, because you're working with something like those chords, you're basically working with the finished track as the finished tracks thing. How much are you having to like filter out of that track and then like filter out like top end of your own stuff to get it sitting together?
The chords don't actually play at the same time as this bass, so it wouldn't be too much of an issue.
You're literally just avoiding.
Yeah. Once the bass drops, there's not a lot in the track. It's just bass and drums mostly. And then the kick is as a splice kick. And I've got shape in that, and then a drive on it as well, giving it more of an attack. And then there's some automation on the kick to high pass it and low pass it at various points in the track.
Cool. So from there, so you got those chords in the drop. What's your next thing that you would have made in Hiss?
I would have sorted the drums out after that.
So talk us through what we've got going on.
So the drums are all in a group as well. As you can see, I'm actually very organised. All the drums are yellow. So there's quite a lot of splice samples. Any splice users will recognise the Noizu packs. And I've got Ableton 909. 2 claps. Some random snares. So yeah, it's just kind of a collection of random sounds and loops.
Do you like have like go-to sounds and like go-to samples and things
absolutely,
like that? Absolutely, yeah.
I always tend to start with the same thing. I have a habit where I'll bounce out parts to my own tracks as well, so I have them in a folder to sort of really quickly start new tracks.
So you'll just kind of return to stuff that you know has worked in like a track
and
stuff and just bring those in?
Yeah, and then I'll sort of try and make it sound different somehow, you know.
With something like this, how important is it to be able to like work quickly like that? Do you tend to like want to get like a beat put together and like a drop put together really quickly, or will you spend quite a bit of time on the drums?
To be honest, I normally kind of rush through the drums, and then if I listen back the next day, then I might start them up entirely again. Drums are always a bit of a challenge. I find the kick and the bass to be really easy, and then when I move on to the drums, sometimes I'll totally throw off my own groove that I've already started.
Yeah. How like talking about groove, like so. Obviously, with where if people don't know Ableton Live, you can apply like groove templates and things like that. Are you pulling those like anything like that from the track you're working with, or are you just literally just kind of adding shuffle or things like that?
To be honest, I make very straight drums. If I do add swing to drums, which you can see there is no swing on these drums, they're very on the grid. But if there are tracks where I do, and I would do it manually. I don't like the way that Ableton swing presets sound.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's all in my head or what, but I like doing it manually. But in general, I do make very straight drums.
So talk us through a little bit about what you've got processing-wise on your drums, like how are you making those?
On the drums collectively, we've got a little reverb, which is very low mix, 3% on the reverb, and then this Ableton drum bus, which don't really know what it does, but it sounds cool. You just have it, I've got it at 25% wet, so I'll play it with and without so you can kind of get an idea of what it does. That's with. It kind of like brings out like the mid-range sort of. It sort of makes them sound old as well. I've got this black box which is makes things sound shiny, and then I've got the opposite, which is low sample rate straight after it, but that's only on 9%. And then I've got an EQ to roll off all the shit that comes from all these 3 plugins here. And then the drums are actually side chained off the kick, which is not something I would always do, but you can see it's only just the sidechain's only just hitting very slightly.
So in terms of workflow, so you've got these beats, the beat built and like the drop section built. Where are you going from here then?
I think the next thing I would have done is try to find some sort of sound that makes the drop sound cool without sounding cheesy.
Yeah.
So I've got these things here. And you'll realize that these are sort of doing the same thing as this. So I'm trying to find like consistency and rhythms through the track. So I think I actually bounced this audio from this, which is part of the chord that I played before. So when you isolate that by itself, we got, and then I think I've kind of processed them in different ways to make them sound different. I think that's a pitched down version of the same sound.
Yeah.
And then I've added reverb and stuff. So this is kind of a sound that hits on the drop. And it hits at the same time as this lead that I've made. Now, one thing I always find with these kind of drops is I'm trying to make it feel energetic without making it feel sort of too cheesy.
Yeah.
And it's a very fine line. So when you play these together... And then that's what goes on throughout the drum beat and the bass that I've already played.
Is that something you'll do pretty commonly in tracks then, like as in finding something like that you can repeat in different sections to kind of tie it together? Like
Yeah, I find that when you can have those repeating rhythms, even though the listener doesn't really notice that, oh, that's the same rhythm, it's just something in your subconscious that makes the pieces fit together. And that, I know in my earlier days as a producer, that's something I struggled with. I used to make these amazing breakdowns and these amazing drops and they didn't fit together.
Yeah, because it's quite easy sometimes to make these little loops and then like find that it's not coherent when you listen to it all back. So like, so you've also got this little serum bit here that's kind of bridging the gap between the two.
Yeah,
what's going on here?
This is a preset. It's called Dance You Cunt. And what's this doing? Oh. So that's actually modulating the drive on that sound to the same rhythm as the noise that I just played. So again, it's just more of the same rhythm,
Yeah,
making
so you've got all these things kind of bringing that rhythm throughout the whole track.
It's then got some delay on it and just some more EQ and some sidechain from the kick as well. So it's quite straightforward, that.
Cool. So what's workflow arrangement wise? What's your next step from there?
Okay, next step would probably be the arrangement.
Yeah.
Kind of making things work, because once I've built the build up and the drop, then it's about turning it into a track so you can actually play it.
So you'll normally because obviously arrangement is one of the things that I think newer producers often kind of struggle with.
Yeah.
Like it's quite easy to build a beat and get a groove going or whatever, but then turning that into an actual track. So you're doing that normally after you'll build your drop, you'll build that section, and then you're going to build that into an arrangement.
Yeah, I actually have DJ library full of tracks that I've made that are 1.5 minutes long because I made the build up and the drop and then I got so excited that I wanted to play it. Yeah. And I'll send it to my manager and he's like, yeah, can you finish it? I'm like, no, that's enough, mate. You get the idea. Yeah. So yeah, I the earlier version of this track would have probably been 1.5 minutes long and I'd have been playing it like that. Yeah. So yeah, I would have started at the breakdown. Just kind of trying to make it something that's going to flow within a set as opposed to just being this moment and nothing else. So I think... Sorry, let me go further back. So yeah, I would have built this part next, and it's just a question of taking things away. So we've gone from the full kick drum there to the filtered kick, which is, I think it's the same. I think it's probably the same kick drum, and it's got less bottom end and it's got less sustain on it. And then there's a couple of drums that carry over into the breakdown. The ride carries over, and then there's some kind of noise effect here doing the transition if I solo these. A lot of splice samples there.
So at what stage are you adding the risers and the effects and stuff like that? Is it literally as you're going, you're creating those transitions?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, as I kind of got out of this intro and into this breakdown, I would have added those risers. I probably would have carried on adding though over the next few hours of the process, you know.
Yeah.
And then as this breakdown progresses, you'll see the automation on the kick, which is making it disappear. So it starts, as the breakdown starts, it's there. And then as it continues, it's getting less and less. There's a snare drum coming up here, which has got automation, reverb increasing, filters opening. And that transitions you from this into this. And what was important when I was putting this together is just to make it flow.
Yeah, and you've got loads of automation that you've clearly kind of done.
There's a lot of automation on this.
Is that literally you're like drawing all that in by hand, like sort of mouse? And are you like a controller person?
Oh no, I'm all trackpad.
Yeah.
I'm mostly produced like on the go, so
yeah,
I'm all trackpad.
Yeah, and so talk us through what's happening after that. So like the breakdown is basically you've kind of effectively just taken things away.
Exactly.
From the drop section, like you've got the drop section, taken things away, building them back in. How are you progressing the track from there?
So from there, it's like you said, it's things being taken away, and then we get to this thing which I've marked as moment, which is the bit with the chords. We've neglected talking about the vocal that plays through here as well. So the vocal kind of goes over this breakdown part. And the vocal lets you know that something's coming as well. So yeah, the vocal helps with the build-up as well, because if you listen to it as an instrumental, that bit's quite boring.
So like, I mean, talk about that bit quickly. So obviously you've spoken about how you started with the chords and the beats and stuff. And then you've got that vocal, which is kind of providing like a big bit of the hook on that. Mm-hmm. Would you add that like as you're building the breakdown originally, or is that something you're putting on towards the end of the tune? Like,
no, I would definitely have started with the vocal. That's for me. I want the people to hear the record and recognize it, straight away. So with a remix like this, the biggest hurdle with a remix like this is the actual structure, because it's like there is no sort of, as I said, this track's kind of weird because it doesn't really have a chorus. So it was trying to find a way to fit these hooks, like the chords that I created as the stabs, that's a hook, and then the vocal's a hook, and then the drop's sort of a hook, and it's trying to find a way to make them fit together while also feeling somewhat like the original records though. Yeah,
so can we zoom in on those vocals that you've got there and just have a look? Like, so how much actual like editing are you doing on these? Are you like just slicing things out? Like,
yeah, to be honest, this is warped in Ableton just on complex mode, and then it's on the group, it's just really simple. It's just got some EQ taken off the bottom end and some delay that's automated. This second channel here is just this. So you hear that when you hear them together. So it's just it's emphasizing again, building up into that moment. And to be honest, that's all the vocal's doing. There's another one of these kind of where I've just increased the reverb and the delay.
So you're kind of like
end.
using the vocal to build another like layer of effects on there.
Yeah, exactly. The vocal plays again on this bit, and it's got a side chain on it here. So I think this must be when the kick drum's in. So yeah, I don't really know why it's all on different tracks. This one's a delay again. But it's pretty minimal processing on the vocal.
Like, how hard is it to get like something like that, like a vocal that you've just sort of grabbed from a rip and getting it to fit in with your own track? Because obviously you're saying you've not done that much in the way of editing and you've got those effects bits, but is it kind of just about finding the right...
It kind of is. Like this is like a DIY acapella. So I didn't DIY it, but somebody did, which means it's got quite a lot of artifacts from the original record in it. So if you listen to it by itself, you'll hear loads of little like hi-hats and stuff. So you can't really play it in an empty part of the record, because then you'll hear all the shit sounds in the background. So to be honest though, it's about finding the right track that the acapella exists for, because if you're trying to make a remix of a record that there is no good acapella of, you are going to be fighting against it. And I have done a few of them in my remix career where you're working with a really shit a cappella and you have to have drums playing the whole time to cover up all the background noise and stuff. But fortunately, this one is quite clean.
Yeah. Is it like this quite representative of like how of like that kind of DIY done a cappella is the kind of thing you always work with, or do you ever like work with like full mixed tracks and just slice bits out, and do you ever DIY it yourself? Or
I do DIY it myself. There are a few techniques you could use phase cancellation if you can get hold of the instrumental.
Yeah.
Or you can use a tool like Isotope RX7, which I also use sometimes. And then you can kind of filter the acapella like that. There is no perfect way to do it. But if you have all the tools, then you can find a way that sort of works.
Yeah.
Like I did a remix of Calvin Harris' Miracle recently, a bootleg remix again. And I found that I used one bit of the acapella from the original version and one bit of the acapella from the Hardwell remix, because each version had different bits that were clean, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so you're just finding those bits that you can work with.
Yeah.
So talk us through then. So you've got those bits building up into the second drop, is that right? And so where are you taking the track from there?
Yeah, from that point, there's a couple of things that get added. We've got this Vox sequence. This comes up slowly. I've just chopped up his vocal and used some tools to sort of gate it. That's coming up there. And then there's kind of like a little mini breakdown at the end of this first 8. So I will kind of take the bass out and bring it all back. It's really straightforward. And then there's like a mini snare fill there, a couple of kicks, just doing some random patterns in there. And then it sort of drops again with just some white noise there, which is just cut straight out of Serum.
Cool. So I'm aware that we're kind of I want to have time for some questions at the end.
Yep.
So take us through before we get there. Like, can you share any like major mixing things that you've done on this? Like in terms of like mixing it down and getting it to sound like getting to work in a club. Is there anything?
Use good sounds.
Yeah. Is it literally just?
Took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah.
If you use good sounds, then you don't really have to mix that much.
Yeah.
Kick drum is everything. It's dance music. The kick drum. I used to use the same kick drum on every track. I did it for years, and it was awful because kick drums aren't equal, you know.
Yeah.
So test out kick drums. The best way to fix a shit track is to change the kick drum.
So your kick you've got here, like you're not layering that. You've literally just
no, it's straight out of splice, and as I say, I've shaped it to make it less, to make the tail of it a little bit quieter, and I've added this drive on the attack. And that's all it is. It's straight off splice, you can see.
Yeah.
It's in D sharp, and I believe the track is in D sharp, but that's not always the way I would work.
You don't always tune it?
No, I don't always tune a kick, and sometimes it's better to not tune a kick because it's just going to be in the same frequency as your bass if the bass is in the key of the track.
Yeah. So
this one is in D sharp, but that's. Yeah.
Anything else you're doing, like mixing wise, like before you? So for one thing, firstly, would you just like? Will you bounce this and like just take it to a club like from your own version, or will you get it mastered?
So I finished this track myself, but I wouldn't always do that. Like, to be honest with you, after the initial test, I would see how much work it needs, and then kind of make the decision as to whether or not I would ask someone else to finish it. You know?
Yeah.
Like I've got a guy who'll do stem masters for me. So sometimes if I'm doing loads of touring and I don't have the opportunity to get in a studio and finish something, I'll say, can you take these stems and just make sure that it's all tight? Yeah. But with this one I did finish it myself, and you can see there's like a master chain there on the end, and obviously that's the bit everyone wants to know because they think it's the secret to mixing, but it's not. So yeah, just in terms of mix secrets, I've got as I've showed you, the things on the drums, making the drums bright, making the drums loud, using a good kick that's solid, making sure that your kick is the loudest thing in the track. I've made that mistake before where the kick's just lost. And then the relationship between the kick and the bass. So if I play these together, and if I show like I use a waveform analyzer like all the time when I'm mixing, so I'll use this on the master, and you can see the kick and the bass playing together, and the volume between the two sits nicely, and you can see there is a little bit of phase, like it hits differently every time, but there's not a lot of phase. And if we see the kick drum by itself and then add the bass, we're not losing any of the kick drum power when the bass comes in. Yeah. But if your kick and your bass are clashing, you'll sometimes notice you'll have this kick drum that looks like massive by itself, and then you add the bass and the kick's got smaller because the frequencies are phasing. So it's just little things that you've got to look for to make sure that your low end's hitting right. Yeah. If your low end's hitting right and your hi-hats are high, there's nothing else to do. Like, just make sure all the other sounds aren't shit, but just make sure you don't have like loads of crazy low end or anything, and you're pretty much good. Do a lot of referencing, like listen to. I don't really do a lot of referencing anymore because I feel like I'm at a point where I know what things are supposed to sound like. But the stage where I got good at mixing, I was just referencing everything. So I think there is a reference. I know this isn't a reference track, but with Ableton, you can stick an extra track down at the bottom here instead of master, route it to external out, and then mute it. And then if we put that on there, then we can play the whole track, right? And then I can use this solo button here to switch to my reference track in a heartbeat. So it's the same track, so you're not hearing any difference. But and then I can A/B between somebody else's track and my track really fast, and that's a good way to say, the hi-hat's hitting high, is the bass hitting low, and that's kind of a fast way to make sure that your track's hitting right.
So in terms of like putting together tracks for the club like this, like is there anything else like things that you've learned over the years, like from when you were kind of first starting out to now, like tips that you could share that like how to guarantee a track's going to work in a DJ set, like compared to early things you made? Or is it literally just a case of just trying and like putting it together? And
I don't think I can say like a way to guarantee it's going to work, but the low end's super important. If you can get the low end right, then it's just going to feel good anyway. I don't have like a one size fits all answer for that.
In terms of like tracks that you've like made bootlegs or remixes of, like, is there, like, now that you've done a lot of them, is there anything that you know is going to make something work as a source for a remix, or tracks that you've tried in the past that you just like really want to make work and there's something about them that just doesn't happen?
I remixed the Vibes Cartel track once, and no one cared. Thank you. But like what I learned from that is like I love dancehall music, but I don't think there's really a load of people crying out for house remixes of dancehall records. Whereas so now if I'm like this Lil Uzi track, for example, when I first heard it, I was like, it's crazy, and I just listened to it for a few days, and then I was like, I saw the streaming numbers, I was like, this is really popular. Yeah. So that's a good start, because I'm trying to play things on the dance floor that people are like, oh, we know this one, as opposed to a Vibes Cartel track that the people on the dance floor don't necessarily know. Yeah.
And is that recognition like really important to making things work? As in, like, is there ever been times where like you'll chop stuff up and like you've just sort of edited the track too much and it doesn't land,
to the point where people don't understand what it is? Yeah, for sure. There's no point in me doing a remix if it's not recognizable. Like, this is my perspective, because I know that there are great remixes out there in the world that aren't recognizable to the original track. But for me, as someone who's orientated around the dance floor, I want the people on the dance floor to recognize, oh, this is a version of that track that we know.
Yeah. So very quickly before we like get on to a few questions, tell us just like a little bit more about how representative this is of like your way of working in the studio in a whole. So you've got quite a lot of samples in here. You've used Serum quite a lot. Is that fair to say that you're very much like an in-the-box person? You're not...
I'm entirely in the box, yeah.
Yeah.
I sometimes try and do other things, and then I as I say, I make music on my laptop all the time because I'm not always in the studio. I'm traveling a lot. And I like, as well, like you say, I use Serum a lot. I like learning things inside out as opposed to getting new things. I used to have all the plugins, and then years ago I learned how to use Massive really well, and I realized I could make like loads of cool stuff with Massive. I was like, oh, I don't need anything else. Yeah. And then I got Serum, and I was like, okay, this is a bit more advanced than Massive, so I'm going to learn this instead. But I use a lot of Ableton stock on a lot of things. There's not much that I don't use that's not Ableton stock.
And what you think it's worth basically just having those few things and like learning them inside out rather than
with something like Serum, you can do almost anything with it. So if you learn your way around that, then you're going to be way more equipped than if you had 10 synths that you don't, that all you can use them for is presets.
Have you got any like secret weapon plugins you use? I noticed Shaperbox.
Shaperbox. I use a lot of Shaperbox. I've only recently got that though. It didn't come out. The Shaperbox 3 it's only come out recently. But that's an insane plugin. I'm using that on everything. You'll see some tracks where I've got like 5 instances of Shaperbox on one track. So that's amazing. And as I say, I use it for shaping, but I also use it on the master to look at the waveforms. The reason I do that is because I've always been a DJ. I'm so used to looking at waveforms. I know what a waveform means. It's almost like reading music to me. I can read the waveform.
Well, so you just know. Like,
so if I'm watching this as I'm mixing, like I watch this waveform, I was like, oh, and I'm like, and I can solo individual parts, and I'll be like, oh, is the clap loud enough? Let me check the waveform.
Yeah.